O Lord, make us instruments of your peace. Take our minds and think through them. Take our mouths and speak through them. Take our hands and work through them, and take our hearts and set them on fire for Christ's sake. Amen. Please. We are living in an age of restless movement, an era of unrivaled mobility, displacement, and yes, migration. Planes, phones, and Wi-Fi connect us to every corner of the world, and the idea of home has become more a feeling than a fixed address. Economic instability, tyrannical regimes, climate disasters, and civil wars have driven millions from their homes into exile. And the result? A global population that is constantly on the move, often fearful, often unwelcome, and sometimes resentful, but surprisingly, often hopeful. Maybe hope is all they have left. Even for those who never flee their homeland, the experience of exile is familiar. Gone are the days when generations lived on the same street or worked for the same company their entire lives. I've moved so many times and had so many jobs, I've lost count. I've had at least 20 addresses. And maybe that's a little extreme for my generation, but it's hardly unusual now. This constant uprooting feeds a deep cultural anxiety, a kind of spiritual vertigo. We feel isolated, disconnected, unsafe. And that insecurity breeds isolationism, violence, racism, political dysfunction, loneliness, addiction, and a desperate search for control. But here's the irony. America was born out of exile, right? It was formed for exiles. We've always been a nation of people on the move, refugees from persecution, seekers of freedom and opportunity, survivors of enslavement. Each wave of newcomers has been both welcomed and rejected by those who arrived before. And the trauma of those beginnings still echoes in our collective soul. And maybe that's why the Hebrew scriptures speak so powerfully to our moment, because they tell the story of a people who learned to find God not in stability, but in movement. So we must consider a migratory God. See, one of the most radical things about Israel's faith was that God was not local. Every ancient tribe and culture had gods tied to mountains or rivers or cities or other geographical locations, but the God of Abraham said, "Go, leave your country, and wherever you go, I'll go with you." In other words, God was the first migrant. And when the Israelites tried to lock God inside the temple, to bind and possess God and God's people with legalisms and rituals, things went downhill fast. They forgot their mission. It wasn't to be an empire, to lord their special status over others. It was to be a light to the nations, a people known for justice and hospitality because they knew the trauma of homelessness. Welcome the stranger, God said over and over, because you too were strangers in the land of Egypt. So God sent prophets. You might call them spiritual whistleblowers, to remind them of who they are called to be. And one of those prophets was Jeremiah, the weeping prophet, who had the thankless task of telling Jerusalem's elites that their corruption had consequences. Exile as classroom. See, after the fall of Jerusalem, its elites were dragged to a foreign city in a foreign land. And after all, it was only the elites who were dragged off. The common folk were left behind in the ruins of Israel and Jerusalem. And Jeremiah wrote to those exiles in Babylon. Of course, they were devastated. Their world had ended. They just wanted to go home, but God said through Jeremiah, build houses and live in them. Plant gardens and eat what they produce. Seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile. And pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find your welfare. That's astonishing. Right? God doesn't say, oh, seek revenge, they're your enemies, right? Destroy your new neighbors, or form a violent resistance movement so you can get back home. No, God says, bloom where you are planted. Bless your captors. Inspire them with your faith, your peace, your character. Build a life worth emulating. See, most successful resistance movements have been based on these principles. I mean, think of Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. Both of those men led movements that realized that their oppressors were ignorant of their own oppression. I mean, they too needed to awaken, to become woke to what truly ailed them. And what's more, most failed resistance movements have perpetuated cycles of violence. I mean, look at Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank today. Is it any wonder that they have been in perpetual turmoil despite numerous peace initiatives? Trauma begets more trauma. But exile, Jeremiah insists, is not punishment, it's formation. And God was teaching them humility, compassion, and perseverance, the virtues that they had forgotten in their prosperity. Faith works best from the margins. See, I've come to believe that religion, any religion, is at its healthiest when it operates from the margins, not the center of power. Faith loses its soul when it cozies up to kings and generals. I mean, it's no wonder that God said to the Israelites, really? You want a king? Don't say I didn't warn you. History proves this pattern, from Rome to the Crusades to the Inquisitions to today's rise of Christian nationalism. Whenever religion and empire become indistinguishable, the gospel of love turns into an ideology of domination. And we need to dominate because we live in fear. We look to an imagined past that affirms our specialness, our right to be the dominant force in our world. And it's happening again. Some voices in our country now claim persecution simply because they've lost cultural dominance. They mistake justice and equality for others as their oppression. And they call for more power instead of compassion. Am your retribution is their mantra. They don't answer questions, they don't converse, they attack. And they just watch and listen to how those currently at the pinnacle of power demean and dehumanize their perceived opposition. And they make no secret of their intent to destroy all resistance. All in Jesus' name. Praise Jesus. That's not faith. That's idolatry wearing a cross. For the cameras, of course. Our gospel reading from Luke echoes Jeremiah's message. Jesus is traveling through Samaria and Galilee, so we know he's among an amazingly diverse population. And 10 lepers cry out to Jesus for healing. And he sends them to the priests, and on the way they are cleansed. But only one returns to give thanks, and he's a Samaritan? The foreigner? The outsider? And Jesus marvels. Was none other found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner? Once again, the outsider becomes the example of faith. He may have not been the only leper healed, but he may have been the only one transformed. The exile becomes the teacher, and gratitude is his transformational quality. And it needs to become our transformational quality as well. Jesus shows us that holiness isn't about where we're from or to whom we belong. It's about how we live, how we love, how we give thanks, how we bless the city we are in, not the city we wish we were in. Seek the welfare of that city. You see, our call is clear. Seek the welfare of the city where we live. Give thanks for it, even if it feels foreign, even if it disappoints us. And that means serving, praying, building, and blessing. Right here, right now. It means befriending refugees, feeding the hungry, standing with the oppressed, and challenging systems that exile others in our name. Because in their welfare, we find our own. And when we live that way, with humility, courage, and gratitude, we discover that God, the God of exile, is still on the move, still calling us forward, still whispering, wherever you go, I'll go with you. Thanks be to God. Amen.
Amen.
Well, that was building up for the last 4 weeks.